Hi, my name is Jim Cooper. I'm the Senior Petrochemical Advisor with the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers. I'm here to talk about why the petrochemical industry is considered critical infrastructure. We make 6 chemicals: ethylene, propylene, butylene, benzene, toluene, and xylene. These 6 materials are the building blocks for all the modern materials that are found in a hospital setting. From the masks that the surgeons are wearing, to the protective gloves, the gowns, the booties, even the draperies, IV bags, the tubing, single-use syringes, all these start with those 6 chemicals. We have to operate 24/7, 365 days a year to enable these materials to go through these supply chains. That's why we're considered critical infrastructure.
We've heard it before. The call is serve. At the turn of the century, Americans were essentially limited to traveling by horse. We answered, producing the gasoline that fueled America's rise to an economic powerhouse. In the 1930s, the Great Depression had the economy reeling. We answered, creating jobs and everyday products that made lives better. In the 1940s, the Axis powers threatened to destroy the free world. We answered, producing the fuel that enabled the Allies' airstrikes. In the 1970s, an energy crisis ground America to a halt. We answered, becoming the most efficient crude refining system in the world. In 2020, the coronavirus came to our shores. We answered, working around the clock to produce the raw materials for the masks, gloves, and sanitizers needed to protect us all. When the next call comes, we'll be right there with you, ready to answer.
Oh, it's beautiful today. I absolutely love to fly. It's my favorite thing to do.
Schneider 76 Whiskey Bravo's airborne.
My name is Michael. I'm the founder of Pilots to the Rescue. The first rescue that I did was back in 2015. Someone took these puppies and threw them on the side of the ditch.
1000 climbing, IDET 976 Whiskey Bravo.
After I rescued those puppies, I realized that there's such a need for rescuing animals.
Today we're going to be rescuing 16 animals, 12 puppies, 4 dogs. North Carolina has a big overcrowded shelter.
They're getting 50 dogs a day, and if you don't get them out, they unfortunately have to euthanize them.
3025 976 Whiskey Bravo.
We can rescue animals in a short period of time.
Yes, Mama, I know. I take care of you. I take care of you.
I'm grateful for the work that the people do in the refining industry. The essential resource that we need is fuel, and I needed to do this mission.
Raise your hand if you never want to do this again. We all want our lives back, but we also want to be safer and smarter tomorrow. America's fuel and petrochemical manufacturers know how to weather storms. We proudly keep essential services running, and we're making the key ingredients for new products, like reusable PPE, advanced testing, and cleaning solutions that help bring us all safely back together. This is how we make progress.
Hello, thank you for joining us today for this very special panel. Today we're going to be talking to a couple of contractors that are working at Distinguished Safety Award sites, and I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about, and hopefully we'll get under the hood and you guys can understand a little bit better about what it's like to work for one of these sites. So with no further ado, I'll jump in real fast and just ask Robert if you could just introduce yourself, tell us the company you work for, and what you do on the site.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Robert Thomas. I'm the Site Safety Manager for Schultz Industrial Services here at Chevron El Segundo, California. little bit about myself. I came into this industry back in 1998. I was intrigued about, I had first trained to be a firefighter back in the mid 90s. And then I met someone, I didn't become a firefighter, but then I met someone who was a fire watch. And I was like, what is that? And she explained what that was and gave me some instruction on how to get hired at one of these refineries. And I took that to heart. And then a month later, I was working in this industry. And that was, again, back in 1998. And so I started in the field like many people do. Get your feet wet, learn a trade. Mine was always safety, though. So I worked myself to a foreman position. My first job sent out as a foreman, and ever since then I've worked my way up to site safety manager, regional health and safety director for a couple of companies, and then I landed here. In, I think, 2003, I came here to Chevron for the very first time. And when I landed here, it really, really intrigued me because of just their approach to not only the safety culture, but the contractor safe workforce. They had a sense of inclusivity, right? They didn't look at contractors as secondhand or a stepchild, but they really, really stood behind the contractors and made us feel comfortable. And so over the years, I worked here, and then I went to other sites and did turnarounds. I chased turnarounds for a while, many years. And then every time I would come back to this particular facility, like I said before, I got a sense of home, not knowing that this would eventually be my home. But it's funny how those things work out sometimes. I think the last time I went away and came back, that was in 2007. I worked a major outage they had here, and then still working obviously as a contractor. I became a regional health and safety director for the contracting company that I worked for at the time, which is not the same one I'm working for now. And I made a name for myself here. I met a lot of individuals that worked here doing turnarounds, so much so that they would request me by name on their various different outages. And they'd ask the company that I worked for, is Robert Thomas available? I'd like to have him lead my safety effort for my outage. And so that really, really impressed me. Obviously, I was doing work that they thought was worthy of having me come back. But then that also means that I was doing something good and keeping people from getting injured, right? Then in 2009, the opportunity came where they established a program where they would hire contractors to be secondant to the site, to the client. And I became one of the first 5 called Area Contractor Safety Reps, or ACSRs. And we worked hand in hand with Chevron employees. We wore the Chevron coveralls, and it was as if we were Chevron employees because of the respect that not only we gave everyone, but that we got back. And I served in that capacity for Chevron for 4.5, almost 5 years. I left periodically, a little while, left this industry in 2014, went and worked for Tesla Motors. They needed someone to establish their new construction safety program and their contractor safety program. They didn't have anyone in place. Contractors were out there building the facility up there in Fremont, California, where they're building the Tesla cars. At the time, they only had the Model S out, and Mr. Musk was expanding very, very rapidly. So he had a lot of contractors in there, and they needed someone to manage that. And so what I like to tell, they kidnapped me from Chevron and had me working there for 2 years. And I established their program. I got them on a trajectory of success. We cut down a lot of the contractor injuries that were happening, which is why they sought me out. And I think I did a good job there.
Like it.
I eventually left that position and came back to this industry. The one thing, though, that I saw differently, obviously coming from a refining industry to a manufacturing industry, obviously two very, very different industries. What was constant, though, was construction. It doesn't matter where you are in construction, the hazards still exist. And I had an eye and a flair for identifying and identifying those hazards and making people aware of them and ultimately not succumb to them. I came back to this industry, as I said, in 2016, and I returned back to this site as things come full circle in 2017, and I've been back here in the site safety manager position since then. And so I'm happy to be here. We've actually gotten this award. This will be our third consecutive year that we've gotten this award. And I think we have a good thing going. And I'll get into more of the information as we go through the questions, but that's who I am.
Yeah, Robert. Well, I really appreciate you talking to us about your career. And it sounds like you got some really good experience, got some really good hands-on experience too. So that really helps with credibility in the field, I know. Eric, we'll kick it over to you. Just same question, just kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for your site.
Sure. My name's Eric Birnbaum. I'm the safety director for Lytle Electric Company. I've served in that position for 15 years now, but before that, I cut my teeth in construction in 1992. I worked in the aerospace industry briefly. I guess that would have been a general industry stint for about 2 years as I was putting myself through school just in general studies. And I quickly learned I needed a job, and I didn't really have a defined career path. And so in 1994, I entered the workforce in a small construction firm. It was a family business, and we did mainly mechanical work. And so we dabbled in commercial markets and did HVAC, plumbing, just kind of the entirety of all mechanical, and even did a little welding there too. But I did that for a number of years, and I served an apprenticeship. And so I cut my teeth in the plumbing industry and ended up with my EPA 608 license, and I got my plumber's license out of that. And at the end of my time there, I mean, as I was approaching, I knew it was the end for me. I wasn't enjoying it. I wanted to pursue other things, and I had an opportunity to get into the electrical trades. And so in the year 2000, I entered an electrical apprenticeship, my second, and I served 5 years there and 10,000 hours total on the job experience. And I took my master's license. I actually currently still hold Lytle's master's license in the Indianapolis metro area, oddly enough. And I serve as their safety director, but Jeff Reinhold, the previous owner, had approached me about getting into safety. It was something that was always intrinsic to me. I was floored, very, very much like Robert, with the approach they took towards safety in these industrial markets. And I've worked primarily petrochem. We've done some medical work and we've done some ethanol work, but primarily process safety in petrochemical markets. And there's really and like Robert, again, there was not necessarily a stigma cast upon you. You weren't a second-class citizen. I'd echo that. And there was this high level of communication, and it seemed like we shared a common goal. And I always enjoyed that inclusion. And so when I got the opportunity to get into safety, I did. I wanted to learn something about that, and a non-traditional path for me in terms of education, went back to school and obtained my bachelor's degree in environmental health and safety. And at that point became the safety director here at the company. Have been for again, well, I guess 16 years now. And so I've really enjoyed that run. And during that time, we've had some really great accolades. So one of them obviously being a part of this DSA panel, that was a great thing. But before that, we in 2009, we had a really exciting year. We had applied for our OSHA VPP and achieved that as a contractor. And so we became the first electrical contractor in the state of Illinois to obtain a VPP, and we maintained that. So that was a very neat thing. We just missed it for all of Region 5 by a couple months. Another contractor beat us by a few months. And then 3 months later, the Cambridge Center of Behavioral Studies was invited in to take a look and kick the tires and look under the hood of our program. We had a very active behavior-based safety program, and it was part of our hazard recognition and hazard mitigation control here. And they came in and liked what we were doing, and we sought accreditation through the CCBS, and we were the first contractor on the globe that had achieved accreditation. So that was very neat. So I'm in good company now. There are several that are accredited, but that was certainly a good ride. But so I've been doing a number of years.
Real fast on that, can you just touch real fast a little bit? Just tell us how hard it is to get one of those. I realize that's a pretty prestigious accomplishment.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about just what it takes to get that?
Sure. Yeah. So, and I didn't know if that was now or later, but absolutely, I'll delve into it. So that process, before I could do anything, I needed 3 years of data behind me. And so I needed to have a process. It needed to be documented, codified, in place, perform structured training with our employee group. And we made it voluntary, and it was part of new hire orientation. It wasn't a hard sell because it was a few extra hours where they weren't out wrenching on things. So I had a lot of volunteers, everybody wanted to go through. And it was a very active program in the day. We had our own database at the time, and we've since rolled out of it. And at that time, though, we needed 3 years of that structured data. What were we looking at? What hazards were we identifying and mitigating? And all the while, how were we trending on our OSHA recordable rate? How were we trending on our DART? And we saw that classic alligator's mouth, as our observation numbers went up and we were paying attention to hazard controls, injuries went down and they just plummeted. And we really achieved some best in class stuff, and we've maintained some very good numbers. So they came in, they convened a panel, and that's how that works. And these guys are all, usually tenured PhDs, and they come out and they take sabbatical or whatever, take some time off, and they come out and look at your program. But I think every one of the guys that was down, I had 4 PhDs that were down, and all were active professors at universities teaching some sort of psychology or behavioral studies. But they came down and interviewed our employees for a week, and they looked at the program and wanted to make sure we were what we said we were. We paid their expenses, and it was a big deal. It was a big celebration, and we've maintained that. So, and since then, so we were, and I know to talk about the Contractor Advisory Council, there's kind of an elite group in there called the CLT, and I think Robert had something very similar that he was talking about. But we were able to develop a contractor BBS program, and it was kind of a boilerplate program for companies that didn't necessarily have the means in place. We would develop a program and foster them and help them through. And it's a QR based code. You can get on your smartphone, snap a pic of this QR code, and we've got 4 anchor hazards that are on there. They're OSHA's Focus 4 that they stay there, and we've got 3 rotating hazards that we rotate in and out as we take them off the list, as we can reduce those hazards as we're identifying them. So that was some neat stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. No, that's pretty impressive accomplishments there with the VPP and the Cambridge award, and then now the DSA. So your site's really got it going on there. I'm going to jump into one question I had here is, and one thing I heard common between the two of you guys is saying that that your site doesn't treat contractors as second-class citizens, which sounds like a common theme there. But other than that, what is the one thing that stands out to you working on one of the safest sites in the industry? And Robert, I'll start with you. Just what if you could pick one thing that's different? You said you've had some experience with Tesla and going around to a bunch of different sites. What's one thing that really stands out to you that you really think is excellent?
Well, I mean, and I'll have to reiterate some of the things that I mentioned before, in that there is a calmness here. There are a lot of competitors in this area where we call the South Bay here. There's a number of other refineries in this area, And so the contracting workforce is very, very large. And when you come here, it's just a different vibe, right? It's really palpable. I mean, you can really tell. And so when the call, and I think it comes from, like I mentioned before, it comes from the top down. There is some expectations, obviously, that Chevron has. There is also expectations that Schultz have. And when we combine and merge those two expectations into one commonality, it's really, really easy to work here and not have a fear of losing your job, right?
Yeah.
One thing with contractors working at a facility, you're always, or I wouldn't say always, but a lot of times you're fearful of what you might do and what consequences it will have when something goes wrong. The way that it translates here is they know that Chevron gives us a clean palette, a clean canvas, and we're able to use that to make sure people understand that we want to understand what happened. We want to understand why this happened. Is it performance based? Is it does it have anything to do with the work environment itself? And once we find that out, then we can work towards correcting it to make sure it doesn't happen again. And so when they know that they can be, they being contractors coming here, when they know that they can be free and upfront with what happened and not fear that they will get walked to the gate, now they're more likely to share experiences with us. And so, and when I say with us, I've been a part of, like I said, I've been on the contractor side. Obviously, I'm on the contractor side now, but I've also been on the client side. And the respect that is given is received and then given back. And so that gives a person the opportunity to really share, like I was saying before, share what's going on, how can we do a certain thing better. And so the one thing I would say is it comes back to the inclusivity that we share here with the client, and they're not beating you over the head to get it done fast. They want you to get it done, but they want you to get it done correctly and safely, and they give us the time to do that, and that makes the greatest difference, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a real emphasis, like you said, on family, and part of being a family is that you forgive each other and you're wanting to look out for each other and be inclusive of each other and their ideas. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Eric, same question to you. You know, what really stands out to you on, you know, working on a site that's one of the safest in the industries?
Sure, and it's a great question, and I wrote down two words: communication and inclusion, and I think those really make up the framework of so many things that are great. What happens out here is there's just such a high level of communication in terms of hazard, in terms of work, what's going on, outlook. Because I think they accepted early on. I mean, these are bright people. You know, most engineers and whatnot, they've went through some school and they have some capacity, let's say, and they understand that in a lot of these facilities, the makeup of man hours, I mean, there's more man hours liquidated in the contract community than there is a lot of times with the host site employees. And so you are really, if you can tap into that energy and tap into some of those varied best practices, and I think that's what they've done. It sounds like even at Robert's side is when they bring you in, well, it's two-way communication, right? So it is top down, but there's also a feedback loop and there's some listening, and I think that's very important. And it's wonderful to see some of your best practices implemented by the host site, or better yet, say, hey, would you like to sit in on a panel? We're reviewing some corporate standards and see something you've done impact a corporate standard. And I mean, there's no better inclusion in the world than that. And so that's one of the things I enjoyed what you said about family and forgiveness, and that's accurate. And I talked earlier about a learning team, and that was what that was had come from, was an incident. And we don't have that many; they're relatively rare. But when we do, you don't worry about getting taken out to the woodshed. There's always some concern, but the biggest question: how can we prevent this from happening again? And really, what happened here? And that's a great assessment of those things. But communication is a cornerstone to it, and that's what stands out to me. Again, we work in some of the lesser sites, and still even some of them. I'm not going to name names, but I mean some of the competitors in the petrochem market don't do it as well as some of the blue chip players, right? And so I do VPP audits as an SG, and I always look at things through that lens. What are their best practices? And you can really tell how good of a family it is. I've been in facilities where line level employees wouldn't break bread, wouldn't sit down and have a meal with management, and there's a disconnect there. And I've never run into it here at Marathon. I've never run into that. So,
well, Eric, I'm going to stick with you just for a second. You kind of you mentioned earlier on a little bit about the Contractor Safety Council. Can you talk to me a little bit about that council, how it works, and maybe some of the things that it's accomplished?
sure. So each of the contract companies that work on site, any length of time at all, I assume they all have master service agreements you sign with the host site, and that's the clerical piece of that. But within that document, it would prescribe how many line level staff you would need before you had a dedicated safety rep. And so that council is comprised of dedicated safety reps and or dual role individuals if you've got less than whatever the contract states. And so that's who makes up the council. So it's anybody performing work on that site. And that council, all those individuals, we just had our meeting today. We have it every Thursday. And it's every other Thursday. We have a contract safety council meeting, and they put forth an agenda, and here's what's happening in the plant. If we had any upsets, we had a weather event over the weekend, it brought the entire plant down. It was on the Ameren side, or the utility side of things. And so we talked about that at length, and some of the hazards. We were closing some units down as they were starting back up. And so that's the level of things to talk about. We talk about injuries and what's coming up, upcoming work, and what streets may be closed down. And it's just a big high-level communication meeting. And right now we've got some peak work activities and some folks we don't see all the time. We've got Deep South in, and getting ready to do a big pick on our cat cracker. And so we talked about that. That was some focus on that, because August 23rd, it's going to be all hands on deck here.
Yeah.
And we're going to start 2 shifts and a lot of folks. So that's the level of things. And then we actually had an injury this week to talk about. We don't often have those, but we talk about those at length. And anyway, we shared topics too. So today's topic was EAPs. God forbid something happen. But if it does, we want to know how to get out of it, because what we talked about today, it came from my group. It's, hey, we're getting ready to bring down the cat cracker as an example. And the cat scrubber, which is a big steam plume, if we have to evacuate, so we always look at wind direction. Well, it's the most visible wind direction indicator we have. We're shutting the cat cracker down. So my guy said, hey, do we need to get extra wind socks around here with this outage coming up? And so we talked about that. And then every other week, there's that more focused group called the contract leadership team. And I'm on that, I suppose, because we're tenured. I've been out here for a good number of years. And we talk about higher level topics. And so, for instance, if I have a contractor that's come on site and they don't have a dedicated safety rep, what tools can we offer them to make their life easier? And so today we decided, hey, we're going to develop just a boilerplate EAP that we can hand out, an emergency action plan, and they can build on that. Just some kind of framework for them, and they can crop their company moniker on it, and they can at least have an EAP that is a bare minimum. They know what to do in the plant. If they have something specific, if they're handling a hazard, they would need to add that on there. But that's an example of something we would do. And we develop training topics and PowerPoints. And one of the things that's come into play during my tenure, and again with this communication, we have some subject matter experts, right? And so we do what I call pulpit sharing. And so I will go out and offer a topic to a contractor, and I'll go out and give an electrical safety talk once a year with a presentation. And it's not the talking head you get every week. You know what I'm saying? So it's this, you have the chance of getting this very dynamic speaker that knows so much about their topic. They come in with these interesting videos and things you don't see on the weekly. And so that's very nice. And we share with one another. And it's always great when we get the guys that do a nerd entry. That's fascinating. The guys that have the helmets bolted to their heads, and it really gets the guys' attention. As an example, Deep South will be a good one. And I know that he's offered to come out and talk about, sins of the past, if you will, the Lyondell-Basell incident a number of years ago that came just right before the crane standard. And so that's an example of what we do. And it's just, again, communication. It's the cornerstone. So.
Yeah, one thing that I heard you say that I really like is that you're asking those what if questions. Sure. And you're building capacity within your system to say, okay, what if something does happen? Here's our emergency action plan to address those changes. So I really like the proactive approach to that. So both sites have done some great work in shifting a focus toward not just learning or reacting to actual incidents and injuries, but also looking at potential incidents and injuries as well. So Robert, I'd be interested to hear how Schultz is looking at high potential near misses and how you're learning from those.
Well, high potential near misses. Well, we handle every kind of incident the same way. Whether it's a low potential, high potential, we look into what happened. We kind of do the interior investigation, initial investigation, and determine what happened. Is, like I mentioned before, is it a human error? Is it the environment, work conditions, whatever it is? We formulate a team. We put together a team. We do whatever is necessary, whether it's 5-wide, taproot, whatever. And because we I guess approach everything the same way, there isn't a fall off. There isn't one thing that we just look at as not as serious or not as important as the other. And so when we do that, we give everything the same amount of energy, the same amount of emphasis, the same amount of attention. And so when I investigated an incident, I am asking questions. We get the team together and we really just delve into what was the thought process behind what you were doing, what you saw, what could you have done differently, and then there depending on what the incident is, there is some disciplinary action that happens, but the great thing about that is they know what the levels are. It's not something that, like I said, if I do something wrong today, that I'm going to be walked to the gate or I'm going to be sent home. Obviously, there are some levels that we run through, but the main thing is that we get that information and then we disseminate that out throughout the corporation, and determine what the lessons learned are, and then the corrective actions, so that not only do we keep it from happening at this site, but as experience tells us that things repeat themselves at other sites, and we have presence at a number of sites here in Southern California, and in Northern California as well. We have a northern and a southern group, and we share that information across the whole corporation, and we have safety flashes and stand downs and lessons learned, and we really understand or try to understand what happened, how we can fix it, and how we can keep it from happening again.
Yeah. Well, it really sounds like that base culture of caring and family that you have is helping you, lead to more inclusive and better learnings from your incident. So that's really good to hear that. Is there anything, any kind of recent near misses you might be able to share? Any kind of recent learnings that you've had?
So there was maybe 2 weeks ago, we had an incident where we had a crew working on a hydro test job. They were hydro testing something, and it was time to depressurize. And there was, I think, a 4-man crew, maybe a 5-man crew, and one of them got a little overzealous and didn't when it was time to have the test pressure actually observed by the client, this one individual thought it was time to go ahead and depressurize, and so he started depressurizing. But the one thing too, there's always there's always a silver lining, and so we stress about first line breaks all the time, and how you are to, when you break a line, you break it down in a way. And so at least he remembered that. And so when he broke it down in a way, obviously we had product come out, and then he closed it right back up real quick. The test pressure was only 250 pounds, so it wasn't a high pressurized system. But the fact of the matter is that he didn't follow protocol. He didn't check with his crew. His crew was actually trying to get him to not approach the manifold and depressurize it, but because of the noise that was in the area, he says he didn't hear it, and so that happened. And so what we did was we gathered that crew together, and we did our step-by-step investigation on it, and it gave us an opportunity to do two things. One, to revisit our first line break policy, and then two, to talk about hazard communication. And so and what Eric mentioned a while ago about how important communication is, it just shone a spotlight on that, and that when you're working with a crew, working with a group of people, you all have to be on the same page, and you all have to communicate with each other of what your intentions are, what you're getting ready to do. And it was good in the end. It was good.
Yeah.
It was unfortunate that the situation happened, the near miss, but because of our approach to it, everybody got to understand why the policies are in place the way they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great that you guys were able to learn from that, and that that goes along with your philosophy that you kind of treat everything the same, and you're trying to learn as much as you can from all the incidents. So that's really good. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
One of the things we hear from contractors is they wish we could all do things consistently between operators. If you had to prioritize things you wish were the same no matter where you go, what would be the most important thing and why? And Eric, I'll ask you that question first.
Well, that's a great question, and it's a tough one. A lot of the sites seem to treat some of the life criticals a little differently, or cardinal sins, or whatever they call them, and they have different demarcations for things, and some are more stringent than others. Some include electrical work or approach distance to power lines or limited approach boundary to live parts, whereas some places don't. And some are a little more stringent than others. And I don't. Marathon does a pretty good job overall. I would say they do. We work in a lot of their different business units, and so we work in their L&S as well, which is their logistics and storage, and run a couple 100-mile circle for them. And I harped for years about corporate alignment just within the company, and they've done real well with that. Recently, there's been a big focus on alignment there, but across different customers, whether that's Energy Transfer Partners or Plains Great American or P66 or whatever, I don't know that we could ever get real alignment, but I can tell, and I will say this: the AFPM, I can tell those that attend and pick things up at the AFPM, and that has a trickle down effect amongst those customers. But I can't pinpoint any one thing, I suppose, that I would make the same. But I will say I agree. There's some disparity.
Yeah. Well, Robert, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on that as well. What's one thing you wish was consistent between sites?
Well, much to the same thing that Eric mentioned. Other sites' approach to hazard recognition and disciplinary action aren't the same. You cannot learn and correct by firing or removing an individual, right? Because what that does is it creates a fearful atmosphere for everyone else. And so then you don't have the willingness to come forward and share what has happened. And so if the one thing that could be consistent across the board with everyone is don't have the badger over the head approach first. Let's try to find out what happened, why it happened, and how we can make it better. That's the only way you're going to get better. That's the only way you're going to learn. And that's the only way you're going to create an environment that people are willing to share. Because the one thing that's constant or consistent with contractors is they will keep it to themselves. And when you keep it to yourself, now we can't find out what the root cause is of this incident or this accident and whatnot. And so when you remove that fear factor from lingering over their head or hanging over their head, like some other sites do, then you allow the truthfulness and the willingness to correct a wrong to come out. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, Dr. Todd Conklin says something that I really believe in, is that you can either blame and punish, or you can learn and improve.
Exactly.
Yeah. So and going back to just the family thing, you know, if you think about how a family is functions and stuff, it's the same way. You know, if you want to teach your kids or your family to do things, shaking your finger and asking them why you did that, it's not really the best way. Trying to understand their perspective is a much better approach. So that sounds like you guys are right in line with that.
Yeah, he shared that. He came here. Chevron brought him here, and he shared that they had a whole program, and he was amazing.
Yeah. So one other question here. DSA applicants, so for the Distinguished Safety Award applicants, are partly graded on how well they drive contractor safety performance. What are some of the things that your company is doing to drive safety performance? But more specifically, how are you driving that down to the frontline worker where the rubber really meets the road? And I'll start with you, Eric.
Sure. So again, going back to that BBS process, that's something that the individual can take with them in the field and correct on the peer level. There's an incentive program to be involved in that, but that's a no name, no blame. And actually on site here, one of the things they've helped us with too, we've talked about punishment, these life criticals and cardinal sins and whatnot. But if we are doing an observation on an individual and having corrective action during one of these life critical activities, they're exempted from the punishment that might come about as long as we correct that activity. And so that's something that's enjoyed, and that really helps where the rubber meets the road, if you will. And we really do a robust pre-task hazard analysis or a JSA that we do a good job with that. And it's not, I think there's some different definitions of JSA. So I know that OSHA has their PDF 3071 document, and it's really for these high hazards, harmful tasks that are just, in place, and you kind of archive those and review them annually, whatever. And I know you guys are very familiar with the STAs or PTHAs or JSAs that we do out in the field daily and identify that. But we've started doing some training with our frontline supervisors on hazard recognition, mitigation, communication skills, and some general leadership skills, and how can we deliver a pretty good talk in the morning to the guys and engage them and do that what if analysis and just say, hey Jim, what have you got going on today? What's your game plan there? Let's talk that through and make sure we've covered everything. And is there anything I owe you? Do I need to go get you anything after we've covered the joint job site visit? And before we have that good huddle moment, and I think that's one of the things that we do is we're trying to foster that very organic conversation out there where guys can have a request and have that fulfilled and hopefully feel included. So
yeah, okay. And Robert, same question to you. How are you driving safety performance down to the frontline worker at Schultz?
Yeah, well, we believe in a multi-tiered level approach. You have to incorporate a lot of different things, and we have found that when you have several different initiatives and programs in place, and you disseminate that information out to the workforce, an educated workforce is a better workforce, right? And so much like what Eric was saying, the organic conversations that you have out in the field is what really drives that information home. I pride myself on being more than just a safety manager. I really engage the individual out in the field, and working in the field for as long as I have, I know that typically when they see a red hat coming up, they'll either signal some way, letting people know that the safety the safety sheriff is in town,
Yeah.
or they'll just stop working. But when I come around, and individuals that work under me come around, we come around with a sense of a caring heart, or a caring concern. We show, we get the information out to them. I facilitate a weekly foreman's meeting where I give bullet points and safety topics on a daily basis every week. And so we're talking about the same things. Everybody's talking about the same thing across the whole board. And I go out and I have a conversation about a family or a project somebody is doing at home or whatever, anything other than safety, so that they know that I care about them as a person, as an individual. I'm not there to bust their chops or to see what they're doing wrong, but to understand them as a person. And once they understand that I care about them, then now they care more about what I'm asking them to do and how I'm asking them to be safe. And so it again, it comes back to the family setting, right? You have to show people that you care about them. And when you do that, the guard comes down, the walls that they put up in front of them comes down, and you're able to get through. I mean, as a company, we have many different things, and so it doesn't matter what they specifically are, but what does matter is that we're able to get that information to them in a way that they're going to hold it dear in their heart, and they're gonna do what we're asking them to do, and understand why we're asking them to do it. Right? If they don't understand why we're asking them to do it, they're not willing to really put forth a great effort in making sure it stays in place, right? So
Sure. Well, we've got just about 5 minutes left, and what I want to do is I want to ask you guys one final question each. Both of your sites talked about stop work authority and how contractors are empowered to use stop work authority. Can you just talk me briefly through how you've taken that empowerment that the operator has given you, and then empowered your workers to use stop work authority? Again, where does the rubber meet the road there? And Eric, I'll start with you, and then Robert, I'll let you finish up.
Sure. So we've shut down a good many jobs. I just shut down a job today up on the north fence line, and so it's easy to stop work, and it should be, and there's a reason for that. And if nothing else, to call timeout and say, hey, what have we got here? I just as an example today, it's usually something to do with power lines and approach distance to power lines, whether it's a crane or an overhead load or somebody with a man lift, or in the instance today, a JLG driver, a Type 7 telehandler with a rebar cage, and just say, hey, do we know how close we're getting to that? Do you realize that's a 2400 volt line, and we can't really consider that insulated. We don't have degradation testing, so we really need to fall back to that 10-foot realm, and just having that conversation. And it's good. They've done really well in their approach here with middle managers, the operator has, or the owner operator of the refinery, about allowing that and being able to calmly answer questions and not get too concerned about the schedule. Again, it should be easy to stop work.
Yeah.
There's so many pointed examples of where someone didn't have that stop work authority out in the industry. And a young man in Notre Dame comes to mind that was filming a practice from a scissor lift, and he was actually texting on his phone, telling his friends how dire things were, and thought he was going to die that day. And it was self-fulfilling prophecy. And had he had that stop work authority, he could have brought that lift down, and he would have lived, and that would have been the ultimate outcome. So I know we just got so many things on our side out here. I don't worry for that. And we got to give example after example after example. I shut a job down literally 20 minutes before I got on this call. So yeah.
So it's alive and well there, isn't it?
No, it is. It's evergreen.
Yeah, that's right. Robert, same question for you. How are you empowering your employees at the field at the front line level to use stop work authority when they need to?
Well, yeah, much of what Eric said here is what we do out here as well. I do what we call an onboarding with everyone who comes out here. It's anyone and everyone who comes out here sits down and has a conversation with me. And as I'm sharing what what Chevron's expectations are, like I said before, I'm also sharing what our expectations are. And one of them is stop work authority. It's not a responsibility, it's an obligation, right? And I go through scenarios with them. And I say, now, if you are a brand new person on site, brand new to the industry, don't really know what a hazard is, but if something looks incorrect to you and you're working with somebody who's worked here for 10, 15, 20 years, would you be willing to use stop work authority if there's something that doesn't look right to you? And if they don't answer that question with zeal and confidence, then I say, well, here's why you need to be that person who can do that. Because this is an industry where the consequences are grave. And just that moment of hesitancy could cost somebody a limb, a finger, a life, an eye, or whatever. And so we get permission from Chevron to use stop work authority. If to the point where they would rather you go home, think about it, and come back. How important it is to use stop work authority. And and Eric mentioned it once before, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're stopping the work, but you have a pause. You have a pause to kind of understand what is going on, what you see that is not quite right, or you don't quite understand, or you got a work direction where now the work direction is going in another direction, and you just want to just have a pause moment. But it is encouraged out here, and Chevron gives us the green light, and we run with it. And so it like he said, we don't have a problem with guys not utilizing their stop work authority moments.
It's good. Good. Well, hey, that's all the time we have, and I just want to thank you both, Robert and Eric, for joining us for this discussion panel. You guys did a great job. I really enjoyed getting to talk to you, and again, hopefully we can talk to you more in the future. There will be more DSA awards in the future from both of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.